All right, here we are, another Friday afternoon of Green Rush Live. Hi, everybody. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, Jimmy Young, and sometimes host of the Green Rush Live show. I am joined every week to talk about the business of cannabis with leaders and influence makers. And in this particular case, at the top of our show, we're going to welcome in Doug Miller, who's become a regular. He's now a regular contributor to our We Talk News, taking a look at the cannabis stock market, as it were. How's it going, Doug? Good to see you.
Very good. Nice to see you today, Jimmy.
And we want to welcome in a good friend of the Pro Cannabis Media family. He's Michael Correia. He is the Director of Government Relations for the NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association. And Michael, it is good to see you and a Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you, Jimmy. It's always great to be here. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Michael. How are you today?
Doing wonderful.
Yeah, you see, you could actually drive to DC, Doug, to see Michael. I'd need 8 hours to get there, or 9 hours now. So just for the record, if you want to hang out with Michael in DC, you can drive there. All right.
You guys need to come down in May when we do our lobby days. Do a show down here in May.
Well, now that's an interesting idea. I didn't even think of that one, Michael. We're gonna file that one away and put it on our whiteboard for the to-do list. You know what I'm saying? Michael, it's a new Congress, it's a new year. Is it the same old arguments over and over again for you guys?
Well, it's a new Congress, and you have to remember, I worked on the Hill for about 13, 14 years. I've seen the majority go, the minority go, and it goes back and forth. Whenever you want to get something done in DC, it takes many years. And so patience is the one thing you need. I'll be honest with you. I started this 9.5, 10 years ago, and I thought this would be an 8 to 10 year process. I didn't think 9 years later we'd still be talking about safe banking. So on that end, I'm slightly frustrated. The year ended, we didn't get safe done, and part of me was like, okay, I'm ready to give up on safe. It's just not going to happen. But we have a new Congress. We have a new year. It is a new year, Jimmy. I'm happy. For the first time in 3 years, the Capitol is opened back up. The doors are open. You don't have to have meetings. You can just wander the halls. It's great. Stop by, talk to people. It's wonderful. Stop by a bunch of offices this past week, checked in with a bunch of members, and it gave me some excitement where at the end of the year, I was like, okay, this is not going to be the best Congress, but I'm feeling motivated that we can still do something in the next 2 years.
I know none of us have gone through a divisive nation like we have right now, and there seems to be a lot of labeling of people, whether they be this side or that side. I'm not even going to use the labels, okay? How difficult is it to cut through the BS and get them to focus on an issue like safe banking, which, 7 times in the House when it was a Democrat-controlled arena. Now what?
Well, I mean, in from a political standpoint, it's pretty hyper partisan in DC. Both sides don't like dealing with the other, don't like being seen with the other. And the last thing either side wants to do is give the other side a victory. And so that's one of these things where it's really hard, where something could be so close on either side. And one side is saying, why would I want to give fill in the blank a victory on this issue? And I guarantee you, Mitch McConnell last year, regardless of what he felt about safe banking, the last thing he was going to do was give Mitch McConnell a victory. And so it's one of these things to try to cut through the partisanship. But luckily, cannabis is one of these things. If you look at people who've sponsored cannabis legislation over the years, you have, right, you have left, you have extreme right, extreme left, you have center. And so it's one of these issues that I think can be uniting, unlike many issues in DC in this partisan time. But it's getting stakeholders, it's getting the advocates, the activists in line, and being able to have a message of not the perfect bill, but what's the bill that Congress can get done, and everything has been safe over these past years, but because it doesn't go far enough, that's not going to happen. And it is, you want to beat your head against the wall of not only, when something doesn't get done, but when something is so close and people are expecting a perfect bill, they're expecting the next cannabis bill to solve every problem associated with racism, discrimination, cannabis. And it's just it's a really high threshold to pass, especially in this Congress. And we need to be more realistic of what are the victories we can achieve in this Congress, whether that's research, whether that's medicine, whether that's VA, whether that's banking, whether that's not arresting people, whether that's expungement. There's lots of different, bites at the apple we can do without getting this home run legalization solving all these problems. And I wish some of our advocate friends, our activist friends would be more realistic in their approaches of what Congress could do and what they were willing to call a victory.
Yeah. Hey, Doug, I'm willing to let you jump in here. I want you to jump in here and ask Michael, have a conversation with Michael, just so you can get used to it. And just so you know, Michael, Doug is an expert on stocks. So he watches them, he day trades, he's a regular on that, and now he's doing a stock report for cannabis stocks that are actually available to buy and trade. So Doug, now that I've set you up and given you a few seconds to think about a good question for Michael, go ahead.
I actually had something in mind already. How
Good.
much do lobbyists still play a part in Washington? Because for many years we had the pharmaceutical lobbyists that obviously didn't want things to go through, but now you see pharmaceutical companies jumping into the space. So I can imagine that they still lobby against it because there's money involved in both sides of it. But how much does it really play effect now? And as far as with the banking, you would think they would have lobbyists like crazy in there just trying to pass it along, because you're talking billions and trillions of dollars worth of revenue that can pass through banking. So what kind of play do lobbyists really have with that?
Well, it's I gave the example as I used to work on the Hill. A lot of times when you worked on the Hill, most of the staff were, newly 20-something-year-old staffers, fresh out of college. They're working their way up. They're overworked. They're underpaid. They came to DC to make a difference. But the one thing they don't have is that institutional knowledge, that history. And a lot of time that's a learning experience. And that's where the lobbyists come in, is being able to have that history. I first came to the Hill in 1996. That was 26, 27 years ago. I was on the Hill, and when I talked to people about the process, it's understanding that. And, both you guys, like I started going to Hill meetings this past week. There are so many new staffers that I haven't got to meet just in this new Congress. I think there's 80 freshman members, and they're learning cannabis for the first time. And they're on the Hill. How do you learn cannabis? What are you going to get, the Cannabis 101 book? You're going to go to lobbyists. Lobbyists are going to knock on their door. And if they're good, then they're going to tell you the history, and they're going to lay everything out there for you so you can form your opinion. I'm not a fan of, when I was on the Hill, of lobbyists that just gave you one side of the issue. It's your job as the staffer to decipher the information. The lobbyist's job is providing the information. And so I think the lobbyist is very important. And people look at the lobbying profession as we have a bunch of money in our hands and we shuffle it to staffers and they do what we want. If I could do that, I would have passed safe banking 10 years ago. If it was that easy, we would have gotten it done. It just shows you what a long process this is and how much educating you need. But on that end, you mentioned pharma. Pharma's there. Pharma spends millions and billions of dollars lobbying around the issues that are important to them. The banking industry, when I started 10 years ago, was not really in this, but has gotten more involved with this. And it's the bankers, the credit unions, the bigger banks. They're up on the Hill. And when you talk to Hill offices, they'll say, yeah, I've heard from the bankers. Yeah, I've heard from this group. Yeah, I've heard from that group. It makes it easier for members of Congress to support something when they have just a massive amount of stakeholders who are behind something. There, in all my years on the Hill and all my years off the Hill, I have to, one of the proudest moments and one of the great things I've seen are the stakeholders who are supportive of SAFE. It's pretty broad based. It's pretty amazing. We get credit unions and bankers working together, and they hate each other. And the fact that they're working together on this issue shows what they're willing to do. But it's the fact that no matter what we do to lobby on this issue, and no matter how good a case we present, if there are people in power, someone like Chuck Schumer, who feels like this is not enough because he has interest, he wants happy activists, advocates, that it's not going to get done. And you have to build a case to those important people to say why it's important. We built a great case of why SAFE is needed. That's given. The problem is there are people who want it to go farther, and that's not what SAFE is there for. SAFE is there for incremental reform, not to solve all the problems. And we've run up against that wall, but I'm not going to give up until we can get this over the finish line or legalization happens. But, to directly answer your question, I think it's a really important part of getting stuff over the finish line, because that's where the money is, to keep this in the public sphere and to keep it in the media and to keep talking about it and having people on the Hill knocking on office doors. Because I've had Hill offices say when they don't hear from people, they just put the issue in the drawer and they focus on the other 100 issues that are a priority. I hate to say it, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but that's so true in politics. That's why you need a constant drumbeat on this issue, and it constantly needs to be in the press.
Yeah, well, I like to say I follow the money trails, and it always gives you the answers. And it just amazes me that the money's being pumped in by lobbyists and everybody. A lot of people have that interest to have it legal, and yet they're still can't figure out a way to do it. And there's people on both sides of the parties that actually would benefit from it. Obviously, they invest in everything. So, and the money talks. So it just amazes me that they still can't figure out how to get the safe banking passed. And we have lobbyists out there trying to pass things. And usually, and that's like you had mentioned, if it was so easy where people were paid off, this would have been done years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm baffled that they still can't figure it out. With all the people trying to figure it out, they can't come to an agreement on something.
And I want the readers to know, and this is important. Safe banking didn't pass because cannabis prohibitionists stopped it. Safe banking didn't pass because cannabis activists didn't think it went far enough and didn't bring it up for a vote. And I'm pointing at Chuck Schumer. This could have easily been solved. Whereas if he really wanted it, he would have prioritized it. He would have got the stakeholders together in a room. He would have got the inch senators in a room and said, listen, what can we do to get this over the finish line? And he would have got it over the finish line. Mm-hmm. If he didn't spend 18 months of the past year talking about his bill that finally came and then ran out the clock at the end of Congress, it's frustrating. And a lot of people, it's inside the Beltway, how the sausage is being made. A lot of people don't know. But I gotta speak the truth about what's happening. It isn't because people are stopping cannabis. It's because it's not going far enough. And we need to keep working on our friends to build a good case. And that's our friends in advocacy. Those are the activists that get them more comfortable around this issue. And they just haven't been comfortable around SAFE because they don't think it goes far enough, which I get it. It doesn't go far enough. But at the same point, it was not intended to solve all the problems. Those are going to be for the next day and the next day and the next day of issues that we need to attack and tackle, but you can't do it all at once. And that's where, people are a little too idealistic and not realistic enough when it comes to reform. And maybe in this Republican Congress, in a Republican House, that could temper some of the expectations, and maybe we can get more incremental reform, but time will tell, over the next 18 months, we'll see. But that's what I'm going to be spending my next, month doing, is reaching out to offices and talking about strategies and priorities and what we can do in this Congress.
I asked Morgan Fox, your old friend, our old friend, current friend, whatever, this question, and it kind of lends exactly to what you just said. Do you think the Republicans will emerge as the party that will enact reform so they can become the heroes, as opposed to the Democrats who've been pushing it to the point where, now it goes in one ear and out the other? Someone like a Nancy Mace from South Carolina, for instance, who did introduce a legalization bill of sorts last year, can she then take control and perhaps drive it through the House and get it at least looked at by the Senate?
So, one, you bring up a good point. I don't think Republicans are going to be heroes on this. Republicans as a whole through the conference don't really care about cannabis legalization. You can look at it in how many co-sponsors are on bills. But in the House Republicans, you have Nancy Mace, you have Dave Joyce, you have Tom McClintock, you have Brian Mast, who are good Republicans on this issue, who are going to be working on leadership to get a hearing, to get a vote and move bills. The problem is there's 200 plus Republicans, and four of them, last time I did my math, four is not a majority. And you do need, a good critical mass. And that could be something, where the new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, may be looking at this issue going, why am I gonna bring up a safe banking bill when this is more of a Democratic bill? So that's something we need to think about. But Republicans don't have to go any farther than safe banking. They could say we did safe and that's it. They don't have to go to equity and diversity and expungement and all these things that Democrats want. And so in that situation, it's possible that, the House could produce safe and that's it. And that's our victory versus a Democratic Congress where their expectation is they need to do more. But we're going to be working on that. I know at the end of Congress, Nancy Mace filed a bill on 280E. That's an incremental bill. I stopped by Dave Joyce's office, Nancy Mace's office, some other offices, and there's some interest in bringing SAFE back and seeing what the Senate does. So it's a wait and see right now, but they just organized. They got a lot of other priority issues right now. And so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and that's going to be the theme, I think, of the whole Congress in the next couple of years. We'll see what happens, if anything can happen, Michael.
But I'm happy because the Capitol's opened up. And now I can bring my computer, go to the cafeteria, sit there and just start seeing people and doing more events and just being around and getting to know people and talk about the issue. That's exciting because it's been 3 years. I mean, I am a lobbyist. I need to be out there. It is great. And like I said, NCIA is going to be doing our lobby days in May. It's going to be an exciting time, and we're not giving up. I'm not giving up just because it's a Republican Congress. You have to remember, the only true, I think important cannabis reform we've gotten over this past year was the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment. That was 8 years ago, and that was in a Republican House. And that got done. And so something could possibly get done. We can't give up hope yet.
Yeah, the Republicans are happy with singles, and the Democrats want the home run. Again, another sports analogy. That's it, right?
Cannabis, yeah.
Yeah, as far as cannabis goes. We did a poll at the end of 2022, like a lot of groups do in media, the top 5 stories in cannabis last year. Now, without me listing 18 of them, okay, which is what we had on our list, what do you think was, according to the people that took our poll, and we had a pretty good turnout, a few dozen anyway. They were all brilliant, by the way, who entered that. What do you think is the top story? What was the top development in cannabis and news over the last 12 months?
Well, I think it's what President Biden did when he made his announcement. Not that it was so historic or he couldn't have done it his first day in the office. It's the fact that, 80-year-old Joe Biden said something on cannabis, put the power of the White House behind this, said, we as a country need to look at this. The federal government needs to look at this and start that process. That's never been done before. And regardless of how many people's records were expunged because of this, or it doesn't matter. It's the fact that the President of the United States made a historic statement on this issue that could pay off, next year or the year after. That's pretty historic. So to me, that would be the biggest story around this from a political lens, because you get the power of the federal government. This is what we've been fighting for years, and it came from Joe Biden. It's not like he's been Mr. Cannabis Reform President over these years, and so that was truly something to me.
Yeah, and you hit it on the nose, Michael. That was the number one story.
For the record, I didn't know what it was, so that was a yes.
And really and truly, now let's go back to what the president did say, because one of the items, besides the federal release of 6,500 cannabis convictions that nobody seems to know one, but it was the idea that yes, federal reform doesn't equal state reform, and the descheduling. And supposedly the DOJ has started looking into descheduling, rescheduling. Any idea where that stands?
No idea where that stands, but it's the glacier pace of the bureaucracy. And I use the example, the Farm Bill passed 5 years ago, and we're still looking for hemp regulations. And so, just for people to understand regulations, it's a bureaucratic process and it takes years. But unlike hemp, the president wants this, and that's the ability of the president to get on the phone to talk to some of these cabinet secretaries and say, give me an update, what's happening, what's going on, could speed up the process. You know how bureaucracies are. It can get slowed down or sped up depending on if you want to move. And so I wouldn't expect anything in months, but at the same time, things could, the news cycle, it could build up support on something like this. And this is what I mentioned earlier about you need stakeholders behind it, just being in the news, being talked about. We know where the public is on this. I mean, it's 70% of the public wants this. It's a slam dunk and a home run. Strange things happen in presidential elections. So we'll see, 2024, that could be an exciting year that, maybe he wants to do something historic and he does something around cannabis. It wouldn't surprise me, but, it's one of the things we're going to be working on.
I can't believe that cannabis is a political pawn.
Yeah.
Right? It really is. That's where we're at right now. And that glacial pace that you mentioned as far as bureaucracy goes and things, we call that cannabis standard time, right? CST. It's like dog years, right? It just takes much longer than the industry wants, for sure. But it's the pace of, would you say, progress in Washington, D.C.?
And I look at parallels, and you look at gay rights movement. I mean, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in the 90s, and it was 25 years later where the Supreme Court was making decisions. I mean, can you imagine working on that issue for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years? And you can't give up hope every time a state does something positive and then a court does something negative and then something positive. It's a tennis match going back and forth, but they're making progress to the point where you're going to have equality, and it takes time. We're going to get this over the finish line. I thought it would have taken 10 years. It's obviously going to take more than 10 years. And I'm still here, I'm starting my 10th year in this. So unless someone's out there who's going to hire me big bucks, I'm still doing this and enjoying it.
There you go. Well, we enjoy your presence here on a regular basis.
I'm going to read Doug's stuff. Tell me where they invest in stocks and make a bunch of money and retire early.
Go ahead, Doug. Give yourself a plug. What's the website?
I have a website. It's called what is it called? Dougie Fresh Picks is where
nice.
And then it has all my links to where I post everything. I post everything all day online for free, and I just enjoy reading stock charts and yeah, I love it all. I love stock charts and cannabis.
Right. Well, we have one out of two isn't bad, because I hate looking at numbers. I hate looking at charts. I don't like Excel. The whole 9 yards is not something for me. That being said, Michael, again, thank you so much coming on short notice. Appreciate it. Keep in touch, and we're going to circle back to you about perhaps doing something live in Washington, D.C. during lobby days in May. Do you know the exact dates right now by any chance?
Yeah, May 16th to the 18th, those 3 days. So probably be 17, 18 will be the big stuff. But okay. That's still 4 months off. You have plenty of time to organize.
You should see what goes on in this room and what we do. It is amazing. We're starting a new live show on Wednesday nights from the only legal cannabis social club lounge in Massachusetts called the Summit Lounge, and that'll be January 25th. So we are always looking for that last minute thing. We'll get it done somehow, some way,
I love it.
I love pressure. I love deadline pressure. Michael Correia from NCIA, taankk you so much. Say hello to Aaron and everybody down there. We're going to take our 4:20 break right now. I think based on what I saw in the chat room, people are already enjoying their Friday afternoon 4:20. We'll have more talk show of Green Rush Live after this. Don't go away. It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now, let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weegits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
Which at first I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm an activist, but I have, held a bullhorn on the State House steps. I have frequently testified before the Cannabis Control Commission in the state legislature, and I'm not, shy about criticizing where I see, mistakes being made. So yeah, I think that's what differentiates me, just an appreciation for the plant. And then also I'm a cannabis entrepreneur myself. I've started businesses, so I've lived that entrepreneurial journey. I know how hard it is. It is absolutely a marathon, not a sprint. So I think that, I'm in the game, not just on the sidelines.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu, so it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are Two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge, and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways, and they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.